In 40k, the Alpha Legion are the most duplicitous of the traitor legions, an unknowable foe infiltrating the Imperium from within. But originally, these same skills were developed for the defense of the Imperium, and their innate secrecy made it difficult for the loyalists or the traitors to keep track of them during the HORUS heresy. Hi, welcome back to Heresy 101. So, after 19 legions, we are now at the 20th, the end of this little series where I've been going through the history and lore for each of the Space Marine legions of the Horus Heresy. I've been looking at where they are at the start of the heresy, where they are at the end of the heresy, and how they got there. So, for a final time, I should say that this video will contain some spoilers, particularly for some of the Horus Heresy Black Library series. The story of the 20th Legion, like all the legions, starts during the Unification Wars on Terra. But really, it's only their development and maybe genesis that takes place then, as the 20th really were the last legion. Though the numbering of the legions was according to the Emperor's plan rather than any particular priority, and the legions joined his armies pretty much as and when they were ready, the development of the 20th Legion to fighting strength happened last. Like the 6th and the 18th legions, they were part of the mysterious Trefoil, 3 legions whose development was shrouded in even more secrecy than the Astartes project at large. In the case of the 6th and the 18th, this veil would be pulled back as they progressed to fighting strength and joined the armies of the Imperium, but in the case of the 20th, the trail of history runs cold. It is apparent from numerous extant sources that during their creation, each nascent proto-legion was raised first to active service in a staged process of testing and trials before the full active force was created through mass recruitment. Each stage of creation would result in an expansion of the gene seed implantation on progressively larger groups of neophytes. The last of these preliminary stages was, according to sources, the Alpha Induction. This was in essence believed to be the first non-experimental implantation, and its purpose was to create a proto-legion at minimum fighting strength to be field tested in open battle. It's clear that the 20th reached the alpha stage, and even that their field tests and genetic tests were stable, but there are no records of any orders to expand them beyond that point, which would have limited their numbers to only a few thousand. Various theories as to why this might be have been put forward, from limited manpower available to the idea that they were a control group for the rest of the legions. But the most likely explanation reared its head a few decades into the Crusade. The Great Crusade was a massive undertaking, an open war front moving with incredible speed across the galaxy. But as the Imperium expanded, it became clear that it had also become vulnerable to threats from within. Various disasters had caused setbacks in Imperial projects throughout the early Crusade era, from rebellions to sabotage, and numerous organizations, from the Sisters of Silence to the Officio Assassinorum, had been founded to combat these threats. But from the 4th decade of the Crusade onwards, scattered reports can be found of anomalous legion activity, operations clearly carried out by Astartes forces, but far from any known war front. These mysterious legionnaires carried little or no unit markings or heraldry, or in some cases bore unrecognized markings not in the official record. In some stranger instances yet, they operated under a false flag, the livery of a known legion, often amid a war zone where that impersonated legion was operating, but without the legion's knowledge, license, or command. These actions were uniformly of a covert nature: surgical strikes, assassinations, espionage, sabotage, the recovery of unknown artifacts, or the abduction of important individuals or entire groups for some unknown purpose. These reports of a ghost legion somewhere out there were hard to corroborate, but for many in Imperial High Command, there were suspicions that this was the purpose to which the 20th Legion had been tasked. A covert force operating in the shadows of the Crusade for almost 100 years, and this theory seemed even more likely when, midway through the 2nd century of the Crusade, these reports stopped, and shortly after, the 20th Legion and their Primarch officially were revealed to the Imperium. If nothing's known about the early actions of the 20th Legion, too many contradicting reports exist to really know about their Primarch, Alfarius. Like all the Primarchs, the 20th was created at the end of the Unification Wars on Terra as the genetic base and general for the 20th Legion, and was scattered in the Great Catastrophe that threw the Primarchs across the galaxy. But beyond that, everything's unclear. One report has the 20th Primarch discovered late in the Crusade, leading a fleet of Void fighters who boarded the flagship of the 16th Legion, the Vengeful Spirit, and fought all the way to the bridge, only pausing when they came face to face with the War Master HORUS, whereupon the two Primarchs recognised each other as brothers. Another report speaks of the Primarch being scattered to a nameless, dead world and having to wait years until he could hijack a passing scavenger ship and escape. And then, contradicting all these, numerous reports imply that the 20th was actually the first Primarch to be rediscovered, landing either on Terra or nearby, and that he grew up alongside the Emperor, a hidden weapon, often operating alone during the late Unification Wars and early Crusade, and in fact was present at the discovery of many of his brothers, disguised as just a regular legionnaire. In this version of the story, the fleet of Void fighters boarding the Vengeful Spirit was an orchestration, allowing Horus to find a Primarch who had actually been operating in the shadows all along. Also, just to jump out the world for a second, that final story is the one given to us in Alfarius' Primarch novel, Head of the Hydra by Mike Brooks, but that's also the only Primarch novel told in the first person. It's delivered as Alfarius telling us a story, which doesn't exactly make it more reliable. Anyway, one thing none of these reports mention is one of the Legion's greatest secrets, that there were actually two Primarchs, twins, commonly referred to as Alfarius and Omegon. While the Emperor was aware of this, it was unclear if this was his intention or an accident of the warp rift that scattered the Primarchs originally, and it was certainly kept a secret from anyone else in the Imperium, helped by the fact that both Primarchs were slightly closer in stature to a regular Astartes warrior and able to hide amongst their Legion much more easily than others. And of course with the Legion's general policy of only ever giving the name Alfarius to outsiders, regardless of the real name or rank of the legionary being asked. But whatever their origin, as far as the wider Imperium was concerned, the 20th Legion and its Primarch Alfarius joined the Crusade around the time of the Rangdan Xenocides, offering their assistance to Lion L. Johnson of the Dark Angels Legion. It was a legion seemingly sprung whole and entire as if from nowhere, with tens of thousands of fully equipped legionnaires and a capable war fleet that operated with veteran skill. In some cases, they announced themselves openly as the Alpha Legion, clad in blue-green and bearing the symbols of the Eternus, the Serpent, Scales, and the Hydra, a fully formed and culturally homogeneous legion led by peerless commanders who could bring to bear a full spectrum of tactics and formations known amongst the Astartes. But in other engagements, the opposite was true. Nameless legionnaires bearing unknown and confusing markings, referring to themselves as the Unbroken Chain or the Harrowing, their armour any shade from dull bronze to black, and the legionnaires themselves responding to no names other than Alfarius. Almost as if the Serpents and Hydras were just another ruse, another public-facing trick to make the Legion appear more orthodox than they actually ever were. In battle, this new Alpha Legion proved itself capable of wielding a devastating mixture of subtlety and overwhelming force, reveling in both meticulous planning and imaginative cruelty in war. Quickly, the Alpha Legion developed an unmatched reputation amongst the Legionnaires Astartes for the use of espionage, infiltration, and sabotage in its strategic planning. Their battle plans would operate on 100 different levels, the enemy being systematically taken apart from every direction before their supply lines cut and morale sapped. They were vulnerable to a single final assault. But as effective as they were, these games seemed to be something of an addiction for the Legion, their battle plans appearing almost needlessly complex, at least to outsiders. To their allies, the Alpha Legion represented a shifting, protean entity of uncertain identity and active deceit, coupled with undeniable military strength, unknowable goals, and, to some observers, unproven loyalty, a dangerous combination and one that did not breed trust. Despite maintaining good relations with the Dark Angels, Iron Hands, and particularly Horus and his Lunar Wolves, the 20th were disliked by many of their brother legions, from the Ultramarines, whose Primarch openly criticised their methods, despite them sometimes converging, to the Imperial Fists and Night Lords, neither of which trusted a legion that was so closed off and secretive. To some, their treachery during the Horus Heresy was totally unsurprising, but it's hard to see how a legion so totally independent could easily be swayed towards one side or the other, and true to form, their reason for siding with Horus was far more complex than most. At the end of the Great Crusade, on paper and according to contemporary sources, the Alpha Legion had a strength of around 120,000 legionnaires, which placed them around mid-tier for a legion at the time, but given their deployments during the Heresy, it's likely that this was a carefully cultivated lie, and the legion was significantly larger, possibly one of the largest of the legions, with a huge and powerful fleet to match. They were also formidably equipped, utilising the most modern marks of weapons and armour, including experimental and test systems unknown outside the Legion, and even Xenos technology and warships on occasion. Apart from their previously mentioned skill in sabotage and infiltration, their tactics were so varied it's impossible to pin down a specific doctrine, but a few things stand out across all their engagements. The first of these is the emphasis the Alpha Legion placed on unity of action and intent within its ranks. Such coordination and faultless discipline was paramount to the rapidly shifting, responsive tactics Alfarius inculcated within his legion, and the fluidity which characterized the legion's deployments on the battlefield. It was repeatedly reported that from their first hours as aspirants, the would-be warriors for the Legion would train and fight together as units rather than as individual soldiers, the success of each one and even their survival depending on the success of the unit as a whole. Though outwardly their structure and formation resembled that of any other legion, in reality the makeup of a company could be extremely variable and fluid, and any individual legionary's role adapted and changed as frequently as tactical needs demanded. This formlessness could even stretch to the individual legionnaire's identity, with hypno-indoctrination and mind-wiping both being used by the Legion to maintain secrecy. The Legion also utilised a huge network of human agents, trained for espionage and terrorism and seeded across thousands of worlds to smooth the way for the Seeker and Headhunter squads of the Legion. In fact, they seem to have had a higher regard for human skill and experience than most of the other legions, and regularly treated their charges as respected comrades. A few years before the Horus Heresy, during a campaign on the world of Nerth, Alfarius and Omegon were approached by representatives of a Xenos organization known as the Cabal, and shown a vision of a nightmare future where humanity was oppressed and the forces of chaos dominated the galaxy. The Cabal had predicted that if the Emperor won the coming war, then humanity and the galaxy at large was doomed to a long slide into suffering as his project slowly failed. But if the Emperor lost the war, then humanity would be destroyed in just a few generations as Horus, racked with guilt, annihilated the Imperium. But the lack of humanity's collective psychic might would, in turn, destroy the primacy of the Chaos powers, banishing chaos from the galaxy once and for all. By allowing Horus to win, the galaxy at large might be saved. It's unknown if this really was the reason the Alpha Legion sided with Horus, an attempt to win the long war against the Emperor's greatest enemy after all, but for whatever reason the twin Primarchs sided with the traitors. On Isstvan V, they already had a force of 50,000 legionnaires conveniently placed to form part of the second wave sent to stop Horus, that being the wave that then turned on the Loyalists during the Dropsite massacre. From there, they were dispatched by Horus to run interference against Loyalist elements, but their actions, as ever, subtly served their own agenda too. In Chondax, they blocked communications from getting through to the White Scars, delaying their entry into the war, but also then allowed the communications to resume when they thought it appropriate. As the fires of Isstvan raged on, they infiltrated the Raven Guard chapter and sabotaged their attempt to hothouse Astartes and rebuild their numbers, stealing valuable information in the process. And as Horus's rebellion advanced on Terra, the Alpha Legion were deployed as a vanguard, infiltrating the throne world itself to sow confusion and attacking the Fourth Circle defenses at Pluto. This surprise us all opened the gates for Horus and forced the hand of the defenders, but at the cost of the loss of one of their Primarchs. In all likelihood, it was Alfarius who faced Rogel Dawn during the battle for Pluto, and was killed, forcing Omegon to once again assume his identity. With that final mission considered complete and their loyalty to the traitor side being questioned, relatively few elements of the Alpha Legion would participate in the Siege of Terror. Instead, they scattered, with significant Alpha Legion forces holding off loyalist reinforcements from reaching the system in time to aid the beleaguered defenders. And that's the 20th Legion. Still one of the most mysterious legions, of which little can be said with certainty, but from the evidence we have, that seems to have been the point. First, an unknown ghost legion hidden in the shadows of the Imperium, and then, well, the same, but with a public face to deflect attention. And whatever their original reasons for turning against the Emperor, they continue to be an enigmatic thorn in the Imperium's side, all the way into the 41st millennium. Thanks for watching. And that's it, all 20 legions done. There's probably another coming up just there to the right, and if you'd like to go back and watch these, I've created a playlist for just that purpose. As always, like and subscribe for more videos about the lore of Warhammer 40,000, and if you'd like to support the channel, there's a link to the Patreon in the thing below. See ya.